Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Joining us now, former New York State government official Lindsey Boylan. Lindsey, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Same here.
So the mayor's primary in New York City is happening in June of this year. Essentially, for all intents and purposes, this is the general election in many respects because New York City is so overwhelmingly Democratic. It's not necessarily the case, but it's likely.
Yes.
Eric Adams, as you may have heard, obviously was under several investigations and indictments, but cut some type of deal with the Trump administration and now is basically on some type of secret probation with them. And it has left the door open for someone who, and I don't want to editorialize too much right off the bat, but someone who I think is not just incredibly disgraced because of his personal behavior, but also from his behavior as the governor, as a Democratic governor of this state. Andrew Cuomo has announced his entry into the race. You worked with Cuomo for a long time, didn't you? Would you just give us a sense of your of how long and what capacity you worked for him?
Sure. So I have a background in urban planning, and I always wanted to be involved in and around government because that's the best way to make our cities work. I started working for him, I think, right around the 2016 election, if that makes sense. I blocked out some of the dates, but suffice to say, I worked for him for over 3 years in increasingly closer conditions. I started out at his economic development agency as an executive there. And the more work I did, the more I was pulled into his direct orbit and essentially worked for him for probably 2 of the last 3 years that I worked for the state, with the title most recently as Secretary for Economic Development and Housing for the state of New York and Special Advisor to the Governor. So I was a senior person working for him, and I do think it's important to note that he was sexually harassing me throughout the entire time. This man is completely lacking principles, and it didn't matter if he was doing it to his very junior assistants, first jobs out of college, or his most senior women like me.
There are, you're not the only person to be on the record of making claims of sexual harassment against Andrew Cuomo. How many women have actually come out and publicly accused him of this type of sexual harassment?
Sure. So you probably know, but just to summarize for folks at home, the Attorney General did a deep report on his misdeeds and his abuse of women and abuse of power after she was asked by his administration to take on that project. And she found that over a dozen women or so were made to feel uncomfortable at the very least, or sexually harassed by him explicitly, many of whom worked for him. Shortly thereafter, the State Assembly put out a similar report saying the same things. And years later, Biden's Department of Justice put out another report in a settlement that they did with the current governor, Kathy Hochul, saying that he had harassed actually at least 13 women. So over a dozen women are on the record, him having done these abusive things to us, sexually harassed us, and we were all deposed in legal processes for that. And I would just step aside and say, given his legal harassment and his smears of all of us, I have no question in my mind that there are dozens more women who he has harassed, but he has made it so unpalatable, so unlivable to be one of his public survivors that he's scared more women from coming forward.
I mean, he had a reputation for a very long time as just being a bully. This was well known throughout the state, and also had major issues with corruption that played out in court prior to these accusations, which is why it's very discouraging for me to see very prominent Democrats like Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, who ran her 2020 presidential campaign along the lines of supporting women on the heels of
She's based her entire career on it. basically.
Right. I mean, you said it more succinctly than I could, basically, about protecting women and the Me Too movement and how important that was. And she was the loudest voice in saying that Al Franken should step aside in the U.S. Senate. And I saw a clip of her last week saying that she's not going to really weigh in on Andrew Cuomo, which is immensely disappointing for me as a woman and also as a resident of New York State. What is your reaction to Gillibrand making those remarks?
Well, we have and we will weigh in on her lack of courage there. I have been told through mutual women leader friends that she feels unfairly maligned and focused on in this situation. And I just suggest that she take a look at what it's like to be me or any of the other women who came forward. And if she doesn't want the hard work of doing her job, then she should resign or be replaced. And don't worry, we will focus on that when the time is coming. I would just tie on to this idea that it's some women actually participating in or failing to have courage around the things they know are happening, like Senator Gillibrand. You may remember the Time's Up organization had worked with the Cuomo administration previous to me coming forward. And so he felt like he had them in his pocket. And the investigation by the Attorney General and other journalists, thankfully, journalism has been a huge benefit to shedding light on this corruption and abuse, showed that Time's Up leaders actually coordinated with him and reviewed letters smearing me. It's a big reason why their organization imploded, because it was clear that they were not actually spending the majority of their time protecting the women that they said they were and that they were fundraising for. We need that protection, but power adjacency screws with a lot of less than ethical people's minds, and some of those people are women like Senator Gillibrand.
Before we get into some of the things that Cuomo did as governor, aside from, frankly, sexually harassing,
abuse of power.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he definitely had a perspective that he could get away with anything.
Yes.
But what I don't think people are aware of is he has been on a multi-year project to intimidate and smear his accusers and accusers that I think we probably don't know of.
Yes.
And he's been doing it at the taxpayer expense. So we have three layers of government. We have the federal government, the state government, and the DOJ. We have the state, the attorney general, and the DOJ have found consistently that he had a significant pattern of sexual harassment of his workers. And then, and in different instances, it's a lot of he said, she said. And so maybe there were, or people don't want to engage in going into the prosecution of this because he had to leave his office in disgrace. Many people thought that was sufficient, did not realize that he would then basically get millions upon millions of dollars of taxpayer money to go out and start deposing these accusers as a way of basically sending a message, it seems to me, and I want your take on this, telling other accusers to be quiet and to discredit these accusers, to make it, to essentially cloudy the waters so that he could do a run like this and try and escape any type of scrutiny.
Yeah, so he resigned. I'm sure we've all seen the clip saying he's sorry. He made us feel uncomfortable and he didn't realize how much the line had changed. And then swiftly afterwards, he went on this multi-year project of smearing and harassing all of us for doing the right thing. And let me tell you a little bit more what that looks like. And I know you know, but just for folks at home, his taxpayer-funded attorney, primarily Rita Glavin, and others working in alignment with her, both on the sexual harassment and the nursing home scandal, have spent, which was released, I think, yesterday, and upwards of almost $60 million. $60 million. 60 of taxpayer money. I think about half of that already is on the sexual harassment cases.
And we should say, these are not government lawyers. These are private. These are the most expensive private defense attorneys you can get. And taxpayers are just, and they are unleashed because they don't have anybody basically saying, hey, I can't afford to do this. This is basically like, you might as well have Elon Musk or Peter Thiel or someone with like unlimited amounts of money go after you. And that's what he's doing, except for it's our money.
Yes, and just to set the landscape on how he's doing that, there are 3 women who he harassed, and I'm talking to you now, but the women who he harassed are significantly younger than myself, have significantly less privilege and platform. I've run for office before to come forward and talk to you right now. So these are women who have truly been victimized in so many levels. 3 women decided to sue this monster in court, in federal and state court. In one case, a woman who is younger than, I think, 2 of his 3 daughters, and who I think had actually played soccer with one of them. This was, I think, pretty much her first job out of college. And do you know what he did? He made her life and everyone in her life a living hell. He sought gynecological records for her. I'm very curious to see how that in any way relates to anything within ethical bounds of the law. Simply because she had the temerity to take him to court. Now, in this case, she was suing in both federal court and state court against, civil rights law violations. She dropped her federal court because he literally subpoenaed, harassed every single person legally in her life and adjacent to her until she felt like she couldn't live anymore. And this is a woman who's, a decade and a half younger than myself. So that's one case. Another case that is ongoing is the state trooper who had dedicated her life to his. If someone was going to shoot at the governor, the sitting governor at the time, she would have to jump in front and take that bullet for him. And you know how he rewarded her for that? By running his hands down her back, the nape of her, her back, and in sexual manner, asking her about her sex life, why she was getting married, and suggesting she wear more dresses. I try not to read too much into the depositions that didn't relate to mine because it's traumatic for me, but this is disgusting. This woman had dedicated her career and her life to protecting this man, and this is how he repaid her. Such a great advocate for law enforcement. And the third, Brittany Camiso, is suing, and I don't know as much about that case, in New York State court. He groped her, and he likes to reference these 5 district attorneys have not pursued criminal charges, but I think anyone who has spent any time in the legal system knows that the majority of sexual harassment and sexual abuse charges end up finding their way to civil court because we are still in nascent stages in criminal court. Why is that the case? We're still in nascent stages of actually respecting women in this country. And I think this man running for mayor is a great example of that. But do not for a second let this monster and his con artists, Rich as a party and others working for him, suggest that district attorneys not pursuing charges in criminal cases has anything to do with the massive civil lawsuits that are ongoing, that have contributed significantly to this man running up $60 million in taxpayer money for his legal defense, and are not even at trial yet. None of these things are at trial. And so hopefully, fortunately, your listeners don't ever have to deal with the legal system. I have had to deal with it indirectly because even though I chose not to sue this monster, he has dragged me through the court system to abuse me through lawfare and forced me to spend $1.5 million of my own money, which, as I said, I have that privilege to do. Most women do not. And that's why I'm speaking up. This man has not stopped his harm. He's used every abuse of power possible to kill us, basically, to destroy us. And I said this earlier this week, this man's path to victory is to destroy the very women he harmed. And while it would be nice if people said, oh, Lindsey, she's out there trying to fight the good fight. I feel bad for her. But you don't have to feel bad for me. Think of these women that I just told you about who don't have my privilege, who don't have the ability to hire an expensive attorney just to fight the monster who abused them in court. The public officers law that has been on the books that is funding his lawfare against all the people he abused is set in place to protect abusers and corrupt politicians from accountability. And I also think it's a very odd interpretation of the law because the threshold in many cases of certain rights and accessibility that one may have to avail themselves in New York government support is to be a policymaking role, which is a certain level of seniority. Well, I was a policymaker. I was a senior member of the administration. I'm not getting any of my legal bills paid, even though I'm simply a victim and simply a potential witness. But this man has made a mockery of every power that he's held. And he's done a lot of it hating on women. And he's used women to hate on other women. So it's just, I want to make sure people understand this. And I'm happy to go into any more specifics around that, because it's kind of mind blowing to think that this man, who was the governor, resigned, for one moment said he was sorry, and then has spent the next several years harassing all of us legally, smearing us in the media, using his taxpayer paid attorney Rita Glavin at one of his campaign launches to smear the victim again, who he sought gynecological records for. I mean, where does it end? Who is going to say uncle and say this is enough? I mean, I really don't think it should have to be the women he harmed, myself included. It should be our leaders in the state Senate and the state assembly. It should be our leaders in New York broadly. It should be lawyers fighting to disbar this monster. It should be all of us. And I think the only good thing about this moment in time is it does give a lot of us the chance to say, hell no, this is monstrous. This is disgusting. This is the essence of a perversion of justice. So, yeah, I said a lot there.
No, I mean, I think, look, and he has been clearly doing this for years and building up to this so that he could run for mayor of New York City. He has had this plan, I think, since probably several days after he resigned in disgrace. Yes. And it's a further disgrace that leaders like Gillibrand and Schumer and Jeffries in particular, all federal leadership who are in New York, who are saying nothing. It really is disgusting. Lindsey Boylan, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
We're obviously going to be talking about Cuomo, about these things, about the Moreland Commission of where he basically set up a commission to look at corruption in New York. And when they started looking at his office, he shut it down.
On that front, my attorney is Danya Perry, and she was involved in the Moreland Commission. So she's intimately aware of his corruption. And to your point, one abuse of power is how he did everything.
It seems like across the board. He did it with the IDC in my mind. I had issues with him taking Ken Langone's money to fund charter schools, and the way he
just
fought
took Ken
against
Langone's money yesterday for his PAC.
There you go. And fighting against universal pre-K. There's a whole host of reasons, but this is, I mean, God knows what he would do with the power from as a New York City mayor. Lindsey Boylan, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And there's a way for people to respond to this directly. If you're a New York City resident, you go out and in that January primary, you vote against Andrew Cuomo.
Do not rank him.
Excuse me, June.
June. Do not rank him, right? I mean, there's other candidates that you can rank, but the best thing you can do to make sure that your ballot goes towards, with our ranked choice system, him not getting any advantage, is not ranking him at all.
Yes, and just to add one caveat on that, I'm pushing two things and hoping everyone can help me do that. Do not rank Andrew Cuomo in that 5-rank opportunity that you have in the primary. And we need you to fill out all 5 of those rankings, not Andrew Cuomo.
Yes.
And here's why. Because if you can believe it, maybe you can, because he's not really popular and hasn't done a great job. But Eric Adams barely won the mayoral role. And he won it in one of the later rounds of ranked choice voting, counting votes. He barely beat Catherine Garcia, and it was by a few thousand votes. So we need everyone who understands what a monster Andrew Cuomo is to tell everyone else not to rank him, to not rank him, and then fill out those 5 votes, because we do not want you or your vote to ever be cast aside. And let's say you choose 3 people for the office and you don't fill out the last 2.
If it goes into the 4th
if your 3
round,
people are out, you're done.
Yep.
So fill out the 5 people and make sure none of those ranks is Andrew Cuomo. That's my other piece of this.
Lindsey Boylan, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you both. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.